We are doing another live stream, another live chat. We're talking story this time, just as always. So I'm Sergio, and we're talking about problem solving today. That is something that always comes up with visual storytelling, and I think we need to keep that in mind. Every single time that we're working through a story, it's not just coming up with creative ideas. It's not just about throwing shots out there and making things happen. It's problem solving. We're solving problems that we have when we're doing our stories and trying to make the best of what we have and the best out of what we can do with the time that we have, because most of the time we're working under really tight deadlines. So that's something I want to chat about today. So big what's up to everybody. Hey there, what's up guys? Hey Chad, hey Birdie. Good to see you guys on Facebook and see you guys on Instagram too. Bring your questions and let's have a discussion about this stuff. I want to see what kind of problem solving techniques you guys are using to get to your results. And I can talk a little bit about mine, because I like to talk about things that come up during the week as I'm working through some of my assignments. And this is really what it is. It is you hit a wall. you start doing something, you try and work through it, and then the problem solving methods that I built up over the years, I systematically break down my problem so that I can get around that wall. Okay, that's kind of my approach to going through some of these story issues. So what am I talking about here? So let's say you have an idea of a story and you're trying to figure out the climax. You're trying to figure out what the character's motivations are, what the path is that this character should take. And you might come up with some first random idea, right? Now, oftentimes that first idea is not usually as refined as it could be. So then what I do for my home problem solving method is I go through a series of what I call like A, B, C, D ideas, right? So I'm going to do the first one, which is like idea A, okay? And I'm going to draw it out and I'm going to see how that goes. And I'm going to do a series of panels, maybe a couple of story sketches to see what happens, let's say at the climax for a character, okay? And that first idea that comes in your head is usually the one that's been like kicking around there and you've been thinking about it a little bit. But what I often find is that first idea is not usually the best idea. And I have to go through this process of double checking myself to make sure that I'm doing the absolute best possible thing for that particular story. And then I'll go through idea B, C, and D, okay? And I'll do different story sketches on purpose, right? Even if I think the first idea A is good, I actually want to do this process and go through the B, C, D idea, right? So it's breaking down that first initial hunch that you have for that story, and then figuring out if that hunch was correct. And what I mean by that is that you might get to a certain point where it's not as exciting as it could be. Maybe that it doesn't make sense when it comes to the bigger picture of what the character should be doing or what the story plot should be about. And that's where you have to be honest with yourself. You really have to take a hard look at this and be like an editor and self-edit yourself and be like, hey, is this really what should happen here? And then the other thing that I do, and this is part of the process, is showing it to other people, working in a team. This is a team sport that we're doing here. It's not just like a solo show. Now it can be, you can work alone and do that kind of stuff too. But I find the greatest ideas come out of a team, out of a story team, out of a group of people who collectively put their heads together and actually come up with some ideas. So if you're working on this by yourself, and let's say you're at home and doing your thing and trying to come up with some ideas and be creative on your own, that's cool. But it gets to a certain point where you want to take those ideas and show those to other people. So let's say you've worked through that A, B, C, and D ideas, and you've picked the one that you think works best, okay? Then you want to do is gather a group of your trusted friends. Maybe some people don't necessarily have to be artists, because you can get like an honest opinion from some casual viewer if you get like a friend who's not into art or something like that. But most people are into movies and pop culture, so they're going to look at your story and actually understand what's going on. So you want that kind of idea too. Then you want the critique and the feedback from other guys that are in the industry that actually understand the process that you're going through, and they can help you work through some of these humps. So that's the process that I follow a lot, and I really enjoy that, being at that point where I can show that to somebody else and get that feedback, because that feedback is really, really important. That to me is one of the pillars of working in a team and having somebody on your side. So this also comes into play with the discussion that I've always had about, like, having a mentor or leaning on somebody that you can trust to guide you through it. And I've done this in my career with directors that have kind of held my hand and led me and taught me things as I was coming up in the industry and working on my story skills. And I've been lucky that I've had these good mentor figures to come in and show me the way. And so I go back and have to do it. But they teach you how to fish. So a good mentor will teach you how to fish. They don't show you the result. They don't give you the fish, right? Metaphorically speaking. They teach you the tools that you need to be able to solve a problem on your own. And they might be able to show you a couple of things that could help. So then what you do, if you're a smart cookie, you're going to grab those tools and you're going to really work at it and to understand that process and that method that I think is so important. And then you work through that problem solving each and every time. Okay. I can get into the techniques and stuff, and I want you guys to bring your questions on that too. So let me know if any of this makes sense, or if you had similar experiences when you're working on your stories. So so Chad, hey buddy, you're mentioning something here. What are your thoughts on using short sighting in order to solve screen direction issues? Explain that a little bit more. So I'll tell you how I solve my screen direction stuff. I'm not sure about that short sighting method. Tell me more about that, and we'll see if other people are doing the same things. But what I do to solve my screen direction issues is I'll flop things a lot. So this is easily done in like a digital program where you can just take your storyboard panel and you just completely reverse it, right? You do like a horizontal flop, and that way I'll go through and make sure that it's right. So let me back up a little bit for people who don't know what I'm talking about with screen direction. So most of the time what you want to do is you have a left side of the screen, you have a right side of the screen. I think this is a really important discussion to have anyway, but so thanks for asking that question, by the way. So then you, in your screen area, right, this is something that we refer to when you're looking at any kind of project. Usually it's horizontal. So you put a line down the middle, you divide that in half, left side and the right side. That's what we call screen direction. The main rule of thumb here is that when you establish a character, you establish an environment, you establish something, you're going to put it either on the left or on the right or in the center. Most of the time, centered established things are pretty boring, and what we usually do as story guys is to make asymmetrical compositions. You want to push things either to the left or to the right. When you establish something on either side of the screen direction, on either side of that screen, you want to maintain that screen direction unless there's a reason to change. That's the whole principle there. So if you have a character, you establish that person like physically on the left side of the screen, right? If I do that correctly, then you want to maintain them throughout the whole sequence on that screen direction, unless there's a reason to change, or we see the character move from one side of the screen to the other, physically move from one side of the screen. That's basically maintain your screen direction. Now that gets really tricky. When you have one character, that's easy, right? When you have 2, 3, 4, or 5 characters, that gets really tricky. And what happens is you can get really lost with your staging and your screen direction there. So one thing I do, just really simple, and I'm not sure about like the short sighting thing, is what I'll do is just put the character on one side of the screen, and I'll mark that side and make sure that character is always on that side no matter what, no matter where I cut. So if I do a reverse shot, essentially throwing the camera on the other side of that character, I will push that character to the same screen direction. So if I started on the left and I throw the camera on the other side, I'll position the camera essentially in that set so that the character is still positioned on screen left. So screen position is more important than actual physical geography of your location, of your landscape, of your set. Okay, let me repeat that. Physical geography, so if you're in a space or if you're in a 3D environment and you're in a set or you're in some kind of location, the physical space is not as important as the screen direction. The screen direction is much more important. The camera position is much more important. So that you have to keep really in mind. Because your end product is going to be shown to an audience on a screen, and that's the way you want to make sure that your flow of your shots is all like in line. Okay, so what I do about that is I take that and I I basically as I'm going through the sequence, I'll make sure that the character is always on that side of the screen. And if I see the place where, oh, wait a minute, he's either in the middle or some kind of gray area or other side, I just flopped him for some reason, I have to go back and do that whole self-editing process, the problem-solving thing that I'm talking about, and figure out how to fix it, how to change it. There's another thing that I do too, which is as you're working through a sequence, you want to think about efficiency because it's not just throwing down shots, and you can do to get one character from one side of the screen to the other side. You can throw in 5, 6, 7 shots to actually get him onto the other side of the screen, but it's not that efficient. It might actually be boring, and the pacing might not work that well. So that's where you want to be really, just take another hard look at your sequence and see if there's a way that you can use staging or camera placement to reduce the number of shots down and actually keep the pacing going really well. So that whole staging and screen direction thing is like goes hand in hand. Okay. Anyway, give us some tips on how you do that, Chad, because I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about with the short sighting stuff. Cool. All right, let me see what we got going on with our Instagram folks. We got a question up here too. So this is a cool question. Okay, Samit Mandre, let me pull your question up here. How to stop liking your own work, because when I see my work after 3 months, I find many mistakes in it. Okay, I should say there's a fine balance between this self-editing concept and being objective about your work and being like so totally harsh with your stuff that you just hate it and you want to rip it up and do it again. Now I've had that case just like you, where you do something, you look back on it after maybe a week or two, and you think, oh man, this is terrible. What was I thinking? This is gone. I'm throwing this out. And then I've had the opposite effect, where like I was so just locked into that deadline that I was glued to my desk. I had to knock it out no matter what. I just had to make those decisions and go. There was no looking back. And then when it was all done, I could take a break. And then I'll look at the stuff after a week or so, or maybe even a month or 3 months, like you're saying, and I'll be like, oh, you know what? Hey, that wasn't so bad. Actually, I came up with some good ideas. That was when like you're really in the flow, and the stories actually came, like you're trusting yourself. The decisions were actually flowing pretty well. So one thing I would say is that you have to be able to identify when you are being correctly harsh with your own work, and maybe a little too much so. Okay, so there's a fine balance there, because I think as tendency, one of the things that I think happens a lot with artists, or I see this with story guys too, is that we're the first knee-jerk reaction is just be like, oh, this sucks, I can't believe I did this, and you just want to throw it away. I would caution you there, and I would just say, look very objectively, see if you can like get up, walk around, grab a coffee, or take a break or something, then come back to your drawing desk with some fresh eyes and look at it all the way through and see what works and really what doesn't. And you're gonna have to trust your instincts on this one. Just know that maybe your first initial gut reaction as you're looking at your shots is that you enjoy the flow, you might enjoy some of the compositions and the way things are cutting, but that you get to a certain point where it doesn't work. It doesn't get that feeling for you, that excitement, the emotional impact is not there. That's where you have to focus on, okay? And then you just have to realize that that's happening there, and then you go through it and make that adjustment. So it also helps if you have people on your side, if you're going to make those kinds of changes. If you have some like a story team, a director, a mentor, like anybody who is like helping you work through those story decisions, if they're on your side and they can be the objective shoulder to lean on, you can show them your work, and then they can look at it and say, oh, you know what, you did good here. But yeah, I didn't get this part, but this part is all working really well. Keep going with that, and just if you trust these guys, then maybe you'll be less likely to just like kind of crap on your own work and throw it away, right? Hopefully that makes sense. All right, let's see what's happening here in the Facebook chat. All right, so thanks for clearing this up, Chad. This is a really good discussion. So let me let me repeat this, what you're saying to everybody out here. So, so you're talking about, okay, when you say short sighting in screen direction, so it's going back to the screen direction discussion. Chad here is saying using the short side of the screen so that everything stays on one side. For example, a character should be on the left looking right. However, due to a need to break the 180 as a result of a set of size of set, etc., you would put them on the short of the composition so they still keep the screen direction. Yeah, this is gonna sound funny, but it's like whatever works. I think if you yeah, I get that explanation. So basically what you're saying is like you're maintaining, if the character's on the left side and that's essentially like now that's the short side of the screen, you maintain that screen direction throughout the whole sequence, right? And you just double check yourself there. Like, my method of doing screen direction changes is basically, it's actually quite simple. It's just making sure that the character's on the left no matter what. So if you divide your screen in half, right? It's a horizontal composition. Let's say it's widescreen 16:9. If you divide it by half, you almost get like 2 squares, right? If within that square, there's still like left of center, right? So if we're assuming the character is on screen left, if they're always going to be left to center, I'm good. I think that's enough for me. Like, if they're in the middle, that's still okay. That's like a neutral shot, okay? But as soon as they start like leaning into the right side of the screen, then you're like, oh, okay, well, that's a little bit, you flopped it at that point. And so then, now let me get to that other point. You guys know this because you probably heard me say it a bunch of times, but there are times and places where you want to flop your screen direction, and it happens all the time in movies, all the time. So I think people often get hung up, especially story guys, on screen direction. They were really hardcore about this at Lucasfilm because George Lucas really likes his screen direction tight, which is kind of ironic because there's a couple of films where he's flopping his screen direction there too. So it really, here's my take on the whole screen direction thing. Yes, you want to maintain it because if you don't maintain your screen direction, you're gonna get a flop, and you're, essentially there's a jarring effect where the audience gets taken out and they're out of the film, they're out of the story, and it doesn't work that way. Usually you want to maintain that. Now, there are ways to flop the screen direction that actually work. One way is to actually show the character move from one side of the screen to the other, that I've said that. The other one is to move the camera from one and reposition the camera so that the character is on one side of the screen or the other. So you're using character movement or camera movement, or both. You can do both of those. The other one is also to do a neutral shot, to cut away to something else and then come back to that same setup, and then now it's reversed, okay? Usually you want to have a couple of shots in between so that it's not as jarring for the audience. So if like you have 2 characters, you cut away to like a close-up on the table, and you cut back right away to those characters, it's still going to be a little bit jarring because they flop positions on the screen. So that's the method there too. The other one is that you can use screen direction for creative effect. You can flop things on purpose, and I'm sure you've all seen this. If you go back and you study this, you'll notice that in action sequence, their flopping screen direction is pretty arbitrary on really high-paced action sequences sometimes, and chase sequences and stuff. But again, you want to use this with caution, because if you confuse your audience, even in a fast action sequence, it doesn't make sense for me. I think the one rule of thumb is just like, you maintain your screen direction. You might flop it a couple times, but you go back to that same screen direction that you've established first. The other kind of creative use of screen direction too, now that we're on this subject, is to have the character going down one way, and then when something significant in the story happens, an emotional change or something new gets introduced, then you can flop the screen direction and actually have the character change direction after that event happens. And it's like a psychological thing that really kind of helps emphasize that for the audience. So those are ways that this is why you need to understand your screen direction, master that stuff, so you can use it to your advantage too. Cool. Yeah, I love it. So Jean-Claude, hey buddy, good to see you here. So yeah, he's talking about fresh eyes and flipping your illustration vertically. It helps too. Sometimes when you're doing a drawing too, talking about flopping things just so that you keep it fresh. Sometimes I'll do a drawing and it doesn't look quite right, in my canvas, I'll flop the canvas just in that panel, and it'll be like a fair character's face, and then as soon as you flop it, you notice like, oh, your eye is like weird, or like, the proportions are off, because as soon as you flop it, you see things fresh for a new time, for a new, for for a second there, and then you can resolve that too. Then sometimes I'll draw like flop that way. I'll correct my thing and then I'll reverse it again. This is why digital tools are so great. Like back in the day, you take a sheet of paper and then you literally turn the sheet of paper and it's like somewhat translucent, and then you draw on the back side of that paper to correct things, and then you go back, you flip it on the right side and you draw it again. Sometimes I do that too, still when I'm working at it, right? Cool. All right, Bruno, it's good to see everybody. See, I love my mentorship guys who are coming here and saying hi. We've been talking about that mentorship, kind of building that up. That's coming, my friends. And I don't want to bore you every single time we're on here talking about that. Whoa, we got Floating Bee on here. This guy's this guy's a monster. Okay, Serge, do you prefer to board out your whole sequence before trying different options, or break it up into smaller chunks and solving any problems with those chunks? Man, that's a good question. How dare you put me on the spot like that? I actually prefer to board out the whole thing before I go back in and break it up into chunks, right? So, like if I'm doing like a big action set piece, or there's some kind of like a big, long, elaborate moment that I'm boarding out that might have different sections in it, right? Even in an action thing, you might have like an introduction part, then you have the main action, then it builds up to a climax, and then all of a sudden it gets resolved. So that's like 4 parts. You can break that down into each section, but I like to board out that whole thing first, like really rough, and I'll just lay out my ideas, and then I'll go back in and take it section by section, make sure it's cleaned up, or it's flowing at least, because I like to work the whole versus the pieces, because what I find is that you get into the details, you get lost in the details of those like sequences, and then you lose sight of the bigger picture to see if the whole thing had a rhythm and had a flow. And this is where you can pepper on top some of these tricks of like screen direction flops, or camera placement adjustments that you do throughout the sequence. So like the camera could start really low at the beginning of the action sequence, all of a sudden it gets up higher, and then maybe turns around and it's reversed in the other direction. So you could plot these things out in like a big broad stroke kind of way, and then you go back and you fill in the details, right? That's the way I work at it. Maybe you guys have some other options of doing that. Okay, so we are getting some of these mentorship questions. So yeah, when is it starting up again? We are about to release our dates, but we're looking at September of this year, 2020. And you're going to see us post more on social media and actually talk more about it. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, this is one of our most elaborate courses that we do. It's a year-long program that we bring on people, and we take them through exercises designed to help their portfolio. And you really get a really strong portfolio out of it. In fact, I had a conversation with a couple guys this week about some of their some people are landing jobs now, and it's really exciting for me to hear that. I'm proud of these guys. They're working hard. They've done the work. They put in the time, and because of not just what we do at Storyboard Art, but their own efforts, their own hard work, that they've come up and had some success there. And then we have a really nice network group that forms there, which is also part of being, like I said, leaning on other people, and then we can use that. So if you have nobody to lean on, this is a good. That's why that kind of group mentality is really awesome. So we can like submit work to people and show things and lean out. And guys are posting jobs, which is really fun. It's just great to see that kind of that camaraderie take place there. So that's super cool. Okay, let me get to some of these questions here. All right. All right, I love it. Anton Draws, you're working on your boards as you're listening to this. Let me ramble on. Although we got some good conversation here, so let's answer some of these questions. So, Rad Art, I usually have an idea in my head and can visualize, but when it's time to put it down, it just never aligns with my visual that I had in my head. What's the best way to handle this? My friend, welcome to the club. This happens to me all the time. I have this like vision in my head, and what I have to do is get that vision in my head down on paper or digitally or whatever format you're going to use, and um, as soon as you start doing that, or as soon as I start doing that, it starts to change into some other idea. Now, sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I like that. I'm able to like really visualize really well, and then bring it down into whatever medium I'm using and put that on the page, right, or create the panel. But oftentimes, to me, I just chalk it up as part of the process. Is that like even though that initial idea was there, that now what you're working with is a different idea that's an evolution of what you've thought about. Okay, so don't look at it as like a bad thing. This is where that like whole if you follow a method of problem solving and self-editing, and you going through a method to get to your end result, that first idea probably was not, like I said, it was not the most refined idea. You want to do like 3, 4, and 5 attempts at doing this one concept till you're sure that you're getting something really unique and original. So there's another factor there that I should mention too, is that like is the fact that like as you're working through these ideas, there's a technical skill that you need to have to work through this, and there's drawing skills and everything else that's involved with doing the work. And so if you're not able to truly execute the vision that's in your head, it might be because you're lacking some technical skills. And so that's where you want to go ahead and just make sure you're practicing constantly, so that technical thing is out of the way, and you can better like flow from your brain to your to your hand, right? Cool. All right, let me see what else we got here. More Instagram stuff. Huh. All right, Irwin999 here. How clean are your boards? Do you have a revisionist? My boards are as clean as they allow me time to clean them up. So let me explain that a bit. I will try and do my best and cleanest work based on the deadline that I have. So if I only have one day to do like 100 boards, they're going to be terribly unclean. They're going to be super rough and super dirty. But if I have 100 days to do 100 boards, then I'll have a lot cleaner boards. You know what I mean? The thing is, there is a standard that I like to meet. The minimum standard here is that the storyboard is clear. That no matter how rough your drawing is, or how simple or just like basic your storyboard is, that it is clear, that the idea is really, really simple to show other people. Okay, and that is important when you're at any point, whether you're doing like super finished, highly polished storyboards, or just rough. You got to knock them out because you don't have that much time. So on average, what I do, and this comes into the discussion of having drawing shortcuts, is that you build up a series of drawing shortcuts of symbols essentially as you're drawing. So when you're doing a character's face, you will kind of do or at least I'll do this. I'll create an average face with the same eye shapes, the same mouth shapes that I can reuse over and over again. Now it's obviously based on that character. So if you're drawing like Buzz Lightyear versus Batman, they're going to be, you're going to be able to tell them apart. But that you're simplifying those character shapes. Like Buzz Lightyear would have a much rounder head and bigger eyes than like I would do Batman. He's got 2 little pointy, ears, right? And so that way it would be, you can differentiate the characters that way just based on your shortcuts, your silhouettes, and your symbols. So the reason I mentioned this when you're talking about clarity and like clean or dirty as you're drawing is that if you draw those outline shapes correctly and you have different solid shapes for each character, it's going to be clear, and then that is about as much cleanup that you need. All you do is throw in a couple of tones, and your storyboard will meet the say minimum clarity requirements for turning something in. Now, there's a caveat to that. Make sure that you're checking in with your directors, your producers, and everybody else, your clients, so that the level of polish that you're giving them is what they expect. Okay. Now I've had this happen before, where I do a series of drawings and they were so rough that they didn't expect it to be that rough. Okay, so you have to make sure that everybody's on the right expectation. If they want really tight, clean drawings, you have to explain that it's going to take yourself longer to produce them. Okay. Second part of your question is, do I have a revisionist? I've never worked with an assistant or a cleanup artist. I've always done my own cleanup. I prefer it that way. I don't. I mean, I guess if I were really, really under the gun, then I would have somebody else help me clean up. What I have done for others is I've thumbnailed out the sequence just in my own way, and I've given it to them for them to clean up. I don't consider them revisionists, though. I consider them story artists who actually take my initial first pass rough, and then they take that and then they go with it. They might change that themselves, but like at least the what do you call it? The essence of what I wanted to pitch in that sequence, they're doing. Okay. I've done that second thing mostly as a director, though. Working with story guys, people should be able to take on their own work and complete it, right? Awesome. What a great discussion. Let me see what else we got going. All right. Let me see what's going on here in... Awesome. This is cool. I love it. You guys are saying that you just got into this. All right. Well, keep it up. This is super hard. Let me tell you about it. And I'm not going to lie. This is not an easy thing to do. But that challenge is so much fun, man. It is just the most exciting, thrilling thing to tell stories. And to tell stories for a living, to get paid doing this is just a wonderful feeling. Okay. I've always wanted to do this ever since I was a kid. And just create stories, and I always wanted to be an animator. And then I got into doing storyboards, and I really loved it. So that's what's really important, is that you learn to appreciate the difficulty, the challenge. And this is why I'm talking about problem solving, because it gets hard, but you got to figure out a way to solve it and not get frustrated that you want to throw in the towel and give it up. You should be wanting to, like, I'll go to bed sometimes thinking about these things and just being like, wow, how is this going to work? And sometimes I can't sleep because I'm thinking about how I'm going to solve story problems. And that's where it becomes fun. Now, obviously, you don't want to lose too much sleep, because then you're going to wake up like a zombie. But the idea is that you love it. You have this passion for it. And then when you're into those hard moments where you got to struggle, that you're able to break out of it and come out on top, right? Solve those problems and create those stories. Cool. Here's one from Okairi Illustrations. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm learning to draw and just got a grasp of the foundations. Is it too early to learn storyboarding? I don't want to miss this opportunity. No. So I tell this again to other people too, is like, I don't care what discipline you are in the film or entertainment industry. If you are a modeler, if you're a lighter, if you're a concept artist, if you are a background artist, environment painter, if you're a producer, okay, if you're like an assistant to somebody on the team, you better know storytelling, because all of us collectively, that's what we're doing. So a lighter needs to know about storytelling. That's really important. A modeler needs to know about storytelling, because the shapes and the way that you model a character will affect the story. And so this is why it's never too late to start. And so, like, I get people who hit us up at Storyboarder and they say, well, I'm in my 50s and 60s, and am I too old? And I'm like, no, you're never too late to start. You want to make sure that you understand these things. And then as far as like being too early, let me see if I interpret this right. Is like, this is the foundation for everything that we do. Like, tell me otherwise. Somebody argue me this principle. Like, show me in the entertainment industry where storytelling is not important. And if that's the case, you're talking about like, maybe like a tech demo or something. Even in video games, think how of the video games that you've played, the ones that are memorable, the ones probably that have really, really good stories to them, right? And movies, certainly. I mean, you can't argue that away. And then everything else, even apps and like, I don't know, any kind of digital format, commercials, you're always trying to tell a story no matter what. And this is why it's just so much fun. So I think if you're just getting started on this, you might people have to come from somewhere. You got to start somewhere, and then you got to work on your drawing skills. You got to work on your technique first. That's one thing I recommend, and then you build up so that your creativity and all your enthusiasm will catch up with your technique, and then you're going to be like a really strong powerhouse. If you combine those two things, or you have like really good ideas and strong creative juices flowing, right? Then you have like really strong technique. You put those things together, and boom, you're gold. That's where you're like, you can express yourself in any way because of the things that you can do, right? That's hopefully where you want to get at, okay? So yeah, some guys are asking about lighting in storyboards, and yes, I think that's a good thing to do. You can light your storyboards, your panels, to make sure that that's part of the dramatic storytelling. I don't use that much. I'll only use it when it helps the story and enhances things, okay? So cool. Let me answer a couple of these more questions, and we're gonna bounce out of here for today. But this is an awesome discussion. We'll continue this more next week. And I had a schedule conflict on Monday, so I couldn't come on and chat with you guys. But we're gonna do these. I try and do these at least twice a week. So if you miss these, I should also mention that we put these on our social media page as a replay, so you can see that there too. Yeah, same. So this is a cool question here from Micah Busan. I think I'm pronouncing that somewhat okay. Do you think about color schemes while storyboarding, or concentrate on colors after the boards are finished? Yeah, my color is something I take out of the equation, and I'm always working on composition and shot choices and the content of the scene before I do any kind of color stuff. Now, this would be the only exception to that would be if I'm doing a story that's specifically on color. Let's say like the characters are a certain color, or maybe there's like colored shapes that I'm trying to tell a story with. Then I will actually use color to actually try and design the story. But I've rarely had to do that. And any kind of color would be secondary to what's inside that composition in that story. So that's why I think it's important that you worry about the content first, the composition, everything that's working, the shot choices, and make sure that story is flowing right. And then you could go back and throw a little bit of color to pop things out, or if you have to do like concept boards, then you go do that. But yeah, stick to the basics, stick to clarity, make sure that is really strong, and you'll be good. All right, friends, this is an awesome discussion. Thanks for coming out and hanging out with me, and we'll do more of these. All right, so have a great evening, and we'll talk soon. See ya.